Hi guys, my name is Angel. A little bit about myself. I probably hold the record for going to Full Sail for the longest time to complete one degree. I am literally back and forth on campus, online, on campus, online. I've been going already since for the past 3 years. Just keep taking breaks or keep something keeps happening, and it's just been a crazy experience, but a good one nonetheless. Anyway, the comic that I chose to do this analysis about is Wraith by Joe Hill. You might have known Joe Hill as the son of Stephen King. He did a lot of different novels, including Nosferatu, Heart Shaped Box. He also did Horns, which they made a movie of, which is not a good representation of the book at all, may I say. The comic I did choose was Wraith, which was actually a prologue to Nosferatu. And if anyone doesn't know what Nosferatu is, I highly recommend reading it. If you love horror novels, it's terrifying. I think it's a really scary book, and I can honestly say that this graphic novel does it justice, especially with all the different depictions of the horror and the murders and the blood and the scares, everything. It illustrates it perfectly. Um, but yeah, I chose Wraith. It is a graphic novel. It's compiled of about, I believe, 7 comics. In total, it is 172 pages, and it was published by IDW Publishing. So Wraith does have a 3-act structure, a beginning, middle, and end. The first act begins on page 8, where you see Charles Manx with a hostage in the backseat, a young girl, and it basically goes into his origin story, how he became the creator of Christmasland, and how his dream came to reality, and basically what happens to those children when he takes into there. And it goes on to tell the tale of 3 inmates getting transported to a courthouse by 2 cops, and they ultimately get in a car accident and have to get rescued by Charles Manx because they are stranded and very badly injured. And that's the end of Act 1, which ends on page 55. The story then continues on page 58 into the beginning of Act 2, where you find out about each individual prisoner and their story. Ultimately, this begins with the flashback of your protagonist and his young boy in a hospital where he's very sick and he's getting refused for health by a doctor, which ultimately leads to his death. And you learn how this man ended up in prison himself on trial. Um, so Act 2 basically sums up why each character is there, and it continues on to their first arrival into Christmas Town, and they see the horrors of the children, what happened to the children, um, why Manx is the way he is, and ultimately you get to page 99, which wraps up the second act, where basically the prisoners and the cops must find a way out of this hell, because if they don't, like Mink said, once you're in Christmas Town, there is no escape. So they each come to their own conclusion and their own plan as to how they're going to get out of this and what they're going to do about the possessed, bloodthirsty children that are after them. And not to forget that each one of these characters, they're not likable characters. You're not rooting for anyone except for the protagonist and the 2 cops, because the other prisoners are awful people. So that adds some excitement to the story as well as it moves forward into Act 3, which starts on page 102, where you see one of the prisoners getting tricked by a child from his past that got brought to Christmas Town, which ends up leading to his demise. So this act really shows what the fate of each of these prisoners, what happens to them, which are all ill-fated. Nothing good happens to the 2 prisoners and one of the cops. And eventually you have the protagonist left surviving with the old lady cop, which they basically band together and they try to find an escape, and they find a sense of solace from the protagonist's dead son, where he leaves him messages inside of balloons, as silly as that seems. So eventually you see the protagonist and the old woman escape from the balloons that were sent from his dead son. And the 2 both escape Christmas Town, leaving Charles Manx and all the evil children behind. And that is essentially the end of Act 3. And it leads with the protagonist going on a new journey to find his son, who now he believes is out there somewhere. When reading this comic, I believe the story is actually not the story of Charles Manx, because he is one of the main characters. I actually believe that the story is about Ace, which is one of the prisoners who gets captured into all of this, into Christmas Land, and is trying to actually just escape alive without getting eaten by the children that reside in Christmas Town. The goal is to survive and find an escape because there is no way out. The road in was completely blocked off by walls magically, and the only way to get out of the town is to get back into the Wraith and drive off. But the Wraith actually only belongs to Charles Manx, and he could only control it. The conflict in Act 2 is supported because basically Manx is explaining to them that they cannot get out unless they follow his dream, and his dream is to stay in Christmas Town forever and live amongst the children and be happy. Well, his idea of happiness, that is not the prisoners and that are stuck there. I believe each character has a solid story arc. There's the 3 prisoners and the 2 cops and then Charles. The 3 prisoners each have their own story. A lot of the story actually goes back and forth with Ace to his past and present and flashbacks of how he got to prison and where he is now, and you actually find out he is a good guy whose son got killed by a doctor who wasn't able to help him, and he ended up getting revenge on the doctor by breaking his hands, which sent him to trial, which then sent him to prison. Well, he's on his way to trial, so that's why he was stuck in all this mishap. So it's basically the main story arc, character arc that you're seeing is this father who lost his son, trying to come to terms with it while trying to find an escape from Christmas Town. And you see how he grows as a character, and he uses his son's love to find these magical balloons to float him out of Christmas Town. And in the end, it's actually a nice ending. You just have to read it. I know it sounds really silly and it sounds really childish, but it actually is extremely creepy and extremely entertaining, and it's a long graphic novel, but you read through it like that, and the depictions of the violence and the scary and the everything is just it ties together perfectly. The transitions between past and present are very simple. I mean, it's not hard to read this comic at all. Basically, when it's going back and forth in the past, it is so obvious that it's the past just because the color schemes are completely different color. They're not dark tone, they're bright colors, they're happy, the imagery isn't like horrific, it just looks like a real world. And then when you're back into reality of Christmas Land, it's all dark, it's disoriented. There's like hidden imagery of horror and skulls and blood and just creepiness all around. And I mean, there's the obvious, like, it tells you literally the date and time and where you're at in the corner whenever there's back and forth flashbacks. And also, basically, when it's going from reading the actual panels in different orders, it's very easy because it's not like you read different comics like The Amazing Man, and I remember reading those and, like, you didn't know where to read next and what panel to go to next. This one is literally, it's so simple. Basically, their panels in Wraith are just left, right, left, right, left, right, bubble, 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 bubble. And if it's not as simple as that, it could get even more simple and just be literally panels stacked on top of each other. You're just going down the line. There's nothing that's complicated at all. It's very easy to understand and comprehend what you're reading. There is there's many examples of where the story makes use of the page as a mini comic. And it works very effectively. There's a lot of examples where you use the full page altogether, and it really tells a story within itself. I recommend this graphic novel to all my classmates. It is a great adaptation of horror, and it's probably the best horror I've seen in a comic. It creeped me out a lot, and it was very detailed, and I felt like I was watching a movie. And from reading the book Nosferatu, from reading this, if everything that I pictured while reading the book, this adapted it 10 times better, and now I have a better visual of how horrific Christmas Land it is and how terrifying it actually is. So I really recommend this. It's very easy to read, it's very fun to read, it's very quick to read, and It's very thrilling to read, and as for my friends, I'm for sure going to force them to read this, just like I forced them all to read Nosferatu, and they fell in love with Nosferatu, so I already know that all my friends are going to fall in love with this graphic novel. Um, since it is a standalone story and a prequel to Nosferatu, I really am excited to see if Joe Hill will produce more novellas like this, because I feel like you go so far with the idea of Christmas Town, because I feel like there's so many small stories that you can make within this, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds. It's been about 4 years since this came out. The first issue came out in 2013, and the last one concluded in like June of 2014. So it's been a few years since, but one can only hope that this goes into something bigger. It is not the most popular out of all his graphic novels or his novels, which is really surprising to me because I fell in love with this piece. But like I said, I'm gonna continue to be hopeful and hope that this gets into something bigger. And if not another comic, please, Lord, please let them make this a movie or a television show or even a web series, because it'll be mind-boggling for people who love horror and are true horror fans, and especially any Joe Hill fan. But other than that, that's all I gotta say here. Um, I could say that this class was extremely difficult for me. I never saw myself as a comic book writer. I always loved reading comics and never thought I would actually make a comic or write a comic. I could say that this class opened the door and gave me the opportunity to want to learn more and to venture further into the world of comics. I don't know yet if I will continue to write comics, just because there were so many times where I wanted to throw my computer against the wall and, just like punch myself in the face 1,000 times. But I will always be a comic book fan, an avid comic book reader. Hopefully one day I will become a good comic book writer. But as of that, that's all I gotta say, and I look forward to reading all your comics, and I look forward to seeing all your videos. So peace out, guys. Good luck out there, and hopefully I meet some of you guys in real life, talk to you guys, and some of you guys talk to some of you guys in real life, and good luck on your Full Sail journey, guys.